All right, guys, so last lesson of this chapter, we're looking at what's called simple interest. So again, this is another one of those really um, real life sort of lessons that we're looking at here. So interest is something you're going to see all the time. And we got two vocabulary words. We got principal and we got simple interest. There's actually two kinds of interest. We're going to focus this lesson though on simple interest, which is good because it sounds simple, right? All right, so principal is the amount of money deposited or borrowed. All right, so when you're either putting money into a bank or borrowing money from a bank or a credit card money or a credit card company, you have what's called your principal, and that's the amount you start with. You either put that in the bank or you borrow that amount. Simple interest is the amount paid or earned for the use of money. All right, so basically what that means is when you deposit money in a bank, the bank is going to pay you just for having money in there. So you earn what's called interest for having money in the bank. All right. And on the other side of that, if you borrow money, you have to pay interest on the amount of money that you've borrowed. So if you borrow $500, you have to pay a percentage of that $500 to whoever loaned you the money until the money's all paid off. The simple interest formula is shown below. And we're going to fill in the diagram using the correct words from the word bank over there on the right. Okay, so we've got I equals P, R, and T. So we want to figure out what is what. All right, so I, let's start there. In our word bank, I've got interest, principal, rate, and time. Well, interest starts with I. So I stands for your interest. So this is a formula to find your interest. The P, you guessed it, it stands for principal. And again, that's the amount of money you kind of start out with. R is your rate, all right? And your rate is a percentage. Okay, that's the percentage rate. And then T, obviously, stands for time. That's how long you have deposited it or how long you are borrowing the money for. It all depends. Okay, so let's come on down here. We have Mrs. Ramirez is investing $400 in a savings account at a simple interest rate of 2% to purchase a laptop computer. She plans on investing the money for 18 months. Based on this real world situation, fill in the blanks with the correct numbers, and we're going to write the rate as a decimal, and time is always expressed in years. All right, so Mrs. Ramirez is saving $400 in a savings account. All right, so her principal is what she started with, the $400. Okay, her rate, that's the percentage in which she earns interest. Well, it says savings account at a simple interest rate of 2%. But remember, write the rate as a decimal. So we got to move that decimal point for 2% over to the left, 2 places. So it becomes 0.02. That's our rate. And then the time is the number of years. The number of years. Well, that's 18 months. All right. Well, how long is 18 months in years? Well, if we have 18 months, that's 12 months plus 6 months. 12 months is 1 year. 6 months is half a year. So it's 1.5 years. So simple interest formula like we just sort of went through on that previous page. All right. Basically, the simple interest is the product of the principal, the annual interest rate, and the time expressed in years. So your interest is just how much money you put down or borrow, all right? The rate at which you have it, and then how long, all right? You just multiply all three of those together. That's pretty simple. It says if you have a savings account, the bank pays you interest for the use of your money. Use the formula I equals PRT to find the amount of interest that will be earned. All right, so let's do that in a couple of problems here. In our first example, Arnold puts $580 into a savings account. The account pays 3% simple interest. How much interest will he earn in each amount of time? So in the first one, we're looking at 5 years. So he's going to use it for 5 years. So we start with our formula, all right, which is interest equals principal times rate times time. All right, so we're looking for the amount of interest. All right, so what's our principal? How much did he start with? Well, he puts $580 into a savings account. So we start with $580 in that savings account. All right, what's the rate? It pays a 3% simple interest. So 0.03. Always change that rate into a decimal. And then lastly, how long in years? Well, as we said here, it was for 5 years. So we multiplied that by 5. So our interest is equal to 580 times 0.03 times 5. If we multiply all those together, we get 87, and this is dollars. All right, so Arnold has earned $87 in interest. That means he didn't do anything other than have that money in the bank for 5 years, and the bank gave him $87 for it. Not a bad deal, right? So what about if it was 6 months? All right, well, we're going to do everything exactly the same as before. We still use that same formula. Interest equals your principal, which we said was $580, times your rate, which we said was 0.03. And then one little thing that's different now, we've changed it to 6 months. Now our time is always represented as years, so we got to write that time as years. So 6 months is 6 out of 12 months, or half a year. So you could write that as 1/2, or you could write it as 0.5. Excuse me, because they're the same thing. So I'll write that as 1/2, just to be fancy. All right, and then we multiply them all out. 580 times 0.03 times 1/2, that gives you a total of $8.70. So in this case, Arnold earned $8.70 because the amount of money he had was only in there for half a year as opposed to the 5 years that he had in before. Okay, interest on loans and credit cards. A little bit different, but the same idea. If you borrow money from a bank, you pay the bank interest for the use of their money. You also pay interest to a credit card company if you have an unpaid balance. Use the formula interest equals principal times rate times time to find the amount of interest owed. So in number 3 here, Rondell's parents borrow $6,300 from the bank for a new car. The interest rate is 6% per year. How much simple interest will they pay if they take 2 years to repay the loan? So again, exact same formula. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed at all. All right. We have interest equals your principal times the rate times the time. So your interest is what we're trying to find. What is your principal? What's P? The principal, $6,300, $6,300. What's your rate? 6% per year, 0.06. Okay, and then how much time are we going to do this? 2 years to repay it. That's already in nice form of a year. So we simply have 6,300 times 0.06 times 2. So how much interest does Rondell's parents pay? They pay $756. So basically it costs them $756 to borrow that much money and take 2 years to pay it off. That's what it's telling us. All right, number 4. Derek's dad bought new tires for $900 using a credit card. His card has an interest rate of 19%. If he has no other charges on his card and does not make a payment, how much money will he owe after 1 month? Okay, so again, same formula. Interest equals your principal, which we said is $900, easy part, times your interest rate, which is 19%, turn it into a decimal, 0.19, and then the last piece is the amount of time, and we said 1 month in this problem. Well, how do we write 1 month as a year? Well, a year is 12 months, and we're looking at 1 out of those 12 months, so it's times 1/12. I recommend you keep this as a fraction because 1/12 as a decimal is kind of ugly. All right, so if we multiply all these guys out, 900 times 0.19 times 1/12, we find that in 1 month he's going to have to pay $14.25 worth of interest. All right, but all right, the question says the total amount owed would be what? Well, the total amount he owes would be the original principal, that 900 he borrowed, plus the amount of interest. So he'd find a total amount owed of $914.25. That's how much he would owe back to the credit card company at the end of that first month. All right, last example. Let's throw a little bit of algebra into the mix here. All right. So Lewis is taking out a car loan for $5,000. He plans on paying off the car loan in 2 years. At the end of 2 years, Lewis will have paid $300 in interest. What is the simple interest rate on the car loan? So let's look at the pieces we have. Our formula is interest equals principal times rate times time. So how much interest has he paid? Well, we said he paid $300, so we actually know I, in this case, is $300. That's how much interest he paid. All right. Do we know the principal? Do we know how much he borrowed to start? Yeah, we know it was $5,000. Okay. Do we know the rate? No, that's what we're looking for. What is the simple interest rate? So we don't know what R is. And how long has it been? Well, it's been 2 years, so we know the time. All right, so we got some stuff going on here. We've got 5,000 times R times 2 is equal to 300. What do we do with that? Well, we simplify it a little. Okay, we simplify it a little. It's nothing really to do with the 300, but over here on this side, all right, we can do some stuff over here. 5,000 times R, well, that's 5,000 R, but I can actually multiply the 5,000 and the 2 as well. Because multiplication problems are called commutative. That means you can rearrange them and put them in whatever order you want. So I can really do the 5,000 times 2 first, and that gives me 10,000. And I'm multiplying that by R, so I get 10,000 R, and that's equal to 300. Well, now look at this. This looks like a regular old one-step multiplication equation. We can do this. All right, we're going to do the inverse operation that's happening with R. So since we're multiplying $10,000 by R, we're going to divide 10,000 by R so that they cancel out. That means we're going to do 300 divided by 10,000 as well. And when we do 300 divided by 10,000, that gives us 0.03. But remember, R is a rate that's been turned into a decimal. So that means if we want to know the percentage, we need to turn it back into a percent. So I'm just going to take that decimal, slide it to the right, this time 2 places, and I find that he had a 3% interest rate on the car loan. There you go. So you've got 1, 2, 3 questions in your guided practice. Do those for homework tonight, and we'll talk about them in class. Thanks, guys.